My older brother betrayed me with my girlfriend in my own bed at 17. My father disinherited him, leaving only $1,000. Now he returns 9 years later begging for money. But my revenge just began, and what I did left them speechless. I'm 31 years old. I work in real estate, and it's been like 14 years since I last spoke to my older brother. And the truth is, I need to tell this story, because a few months ago, he tried to contact me again, and my whole family is telling me I'm resentful, that I should forgive, that family is the most important thing. But honestly, I don't know if they really understand what happened, or they just don't care. I guess I should start from the beginning, when everything went to shit. Growing up, it was just my brother, Kevin, and me with our dad, David, because my mom died when I was like 5 years old. I don't remember much about her, to be honest. Just some blurry images and the smell of her perfume that my dad kept in a drawer for years. Kevin was 8 years older than me, so like when I was 5, he was already 13. And the thing is, my dad worked a ton to support both of us. He'd pull double shifts at a factory and sometimes even triple shifts, so Kevin was supposedly responsible for me when dad wasn't around, the older brother who takes care of the younger one. And for years it was like that. We were close. We'd play video games together. He'd help me with homework. He'd drive me to track practice when I started on the school team. All those normal things brothers do. My dad was an incredible man. Seriously, he worked like an animal to give us everything we needed and never complained, never made us feel like we were a burden or that his life was hard because of us. The only thing he always told us was that loyalty was the most important thing in life. That we could make mistakes, we could screw up in 1,000 ways. Ever betray the trust of someone who loved us? He repeated that all the time, like it was his personal mantra or something. And I grew up believing that. I absorbed it completely. It became part of who I am. When I was 17, I was in my senior year of high school. I ran on the track team and I was pretty good, actually. I had a shot at getting a scholarship for college if I kept improving my times. And I had started dating this girl, Madison, who also went to my school. We'd been together for like 6 months, and I thought it was my first real serious relationship. You know, that teenage thing where you think you've found the love of your life. She came over to the house a lot because my dad was super chill about that stuff. He trusted me and didn't make a big deal if Madison stayed to watch movies or whatever. Kevin at that point was 25 and still lived at home. He worked at an electronics store or something like that. Didn't make much money but didn't pay rent either because my dad never asked him to. Basically, he had it easy there with us. Free food, everything paid for, zero real responsibilities. I sometimes thought he should have moved out already, but it wasn't my problem, you know? He was my brother. I loved him, and it didn't bother me that he lived there. Plus, my dad seemed happy to have him around. So we get to the day that changed everything. It was a Tuesday in March. I remember it perfectly because we had an important competition that weekend, and the coach had given us permission to leave practice early if we wanted to rest. Normally I'd stay the full 2 hours, but that day I decided to leave like an hour early. I got home around 4 in the afternoon when I normally got home at 6. My dad was at work. He wouldn't be back until 11 that night because he had a double shift, and I thought Kevin was at work too because his car wasn't out front. But turns out he'd parked it on the back street because, well, you can imagine why. I went into the house and heard noises upstairs, in my bedroom specifically, and at first I thought maybe someone had broken in to rob us or something because it didn't make sense for anyone to be in my room. I went up the stairs trying not to make noise. My heart was beating super fast, and when I opened my bedroom door, I found them there, Kevin and Madison. In my bed, you know exactly what they were doing. I'm not going to give details because it still makes my stomach turn thinking about it. They froze when they saw me. Madison immediately started crying and saying it's not what you think, which is literally the stupidest thing someone can say in that situation. And Kevin, my older brother, the guy who was supposed to take care of me, looked at me and said nothing. Absolutely nothing. He just stood there putting on his pants, with this expression on his face that was half guilt, half like I'd annoyed him by interrupting. I didn't scream. I didn't cry in that moment. I think I was in complete shock. I just told them, get out of my house right now. And Madison tried to come close to me, but I stopped her with my hand and told her not to touch me. To leave and never come back. Kevin still wasn't saying anything. He finished getting dressed, grabbed his stuff, and went to his room. I stayed. there, sitting on the floor of my bedroom, looking at my bed where that had literally just happened, and I couldn't process what I'd seen, like my brain wouldn't accept that it was real. When my dad got home that night around 11:30, I was still awake. I obviously hadn't been able to sleep. I'd just stayed in the living room basically staring at the wall. He came in exhausted as always, but when he saw my face, he knew something bad had happened. He sat down next to me and asked me what was wrong. And I told him everything, every detail, how I'd gotten home early, what I'd found, everything. I watched as my dad's expression changed from concern to a fury I'd never seen in my life. His hands started shaking, and he got up from the couch without saying a word. He went straight up to Kevin's room, knocked on the door so hard I thought he was going to break it. And when Kevin opened it, my dad told him, "You have 10 minutes to pack your things and get out of my house. I don't want to see you again." Kevin tried to explain himself. He started with Dad. "Listen to me. It was a mistake. We didn't mean for it to happen. All those pathetic justifications people give when they're caught doing something unforgivable." But my dad just kept repeating, "I don't care. 10 minutes. Out of my house." And there was something in his tone of voice that made it clear this wasn't negotiable. That this wasn't a discussion. Kevin packed some things in a suitcase. I don't think it was even 10 minutes. Maybe 5. And he left. Before leaving, he looked at me and said, "I'm sorry, Jason. I'm really sorry." But I couldn't even look at him. It literally disgusted me to look at him. My dad closed the door behind him and stood there with his hand on the door frame. And when he turned toward me, I saw he had tears in his eyes, something I'd only seen once before when my mom died. He hugged me and told me everything was going to be okay. That people show who they really are through their actions, and that Kevin had shown he didn't have the character he thought he had. The next few days were weird. Kevin tried calling several times, but neither my dad nor I answered. Madison also tried to contact me, but I blocked her from everything. From my phone, from social media, from my life, basically. At school, people started noticing we weren't together anymore, and rumors spread. Some close to the truth, others completely made up, but I didn't care. I focused on my training and finishing the year. I got the scholarship I wanted and went to college in another state. Partially because I wanted to study there, but also because I needed distance from everything that had happened. Years went by. I went to college, came home on breaks to see my dad, lived my life, and never knew anything about Kevin during all that time. Like zero contact. It was as if he'd stopped existing for us. My dad never mentioned his name. I didn't either. It was a closed subject. Sometimes, my Aunt Patricia, my dad's sister, tried to bring up the topic. She'd say things like, "You guys should try to work things out. He's your brother." But I always told her there was nothing to work out, that what happened was unforgivable, and that was that. When I was like 26, I'd been working in real estate for 3 years and was doing pretty well. My dad called me one day and told me he needed to talk to me about something important. I went home that weekend and he gave me the news. He'd been diagnosed with cancer, stage 4, in his pancreas, and the doctors had given him between 6 months and a year to live with treatment. I was destroyed hearing that. Like I felt like the floor was opening up beneath me. Because my dad was my rock, the only family I really had. And thinking about losing him was something I couldn't even process. I asked him if Kevin knew and he told me no, that he hadn't spoken to him in all those years and didn't plan to now. I told him maybe he should tell him. Not because I wanted to see Kevin, but because I thought my dad might want to make peace before dying, you know, that thing about closing circles. But he was very clear, he told me, "Jason. That man stopped being my son the day he betrayed his brother in his own house. I raised my sons with one value above all else and he decided to destroy it. I have nothing to say to him." And that was the end of that conversation. The next 8 months were the hardest of my life. I took time off work to take care of my dad, basically moved back home with him, because I didn't want him to be alone, and because the treatments left him very weak. I watched as a man who had always been strong, who had worked double shifts to feed us, deteriorated day by day, losing weight, losing energy, basically losing the will to live. But he never complained, even when I know the pain was unbearable. He'd just tell me, "Thanks for being here, son. You're a good son." My Aunt Patricia told Kevin about the cancer. I don't know exactly when or how, but he found out. And supposedly, he called asking if he could come see my dad, but my dad flatly refused. He told my aunt to tell him he wasn't welcome. Kevin didn't insist further, didn't come, didn't call again, nothing. And I was honestly glad about that because I didn't want drama in the last months of my dad's life. I wanted him to be at peace. My dad died at home, in his bed, on a Tuesday early morning. I was there with him, holding his hand when he took his last breath. It's weird because you'd expect it to be this dramatic moment like in the movies, but it was very peaceful. He simply stopped breathing and was gone. I stayed there sitting with him, I don't know how long, maybe an hour, just processing that he was gone. That the only person who had really mattered to me in this world was gone and I was completely alone. The funeral was small. My dad didn't have many close friends because he worked all the time. Some co-workers came, my aunt and some cousins, neighbors, people like that. Kevin didn't show up. We'd sent him the information through my aunt. He knew when and where it was, and he simply didn't come. Didn't even send flowers or a note or any minimal show that he cared that his father had died. And that confirmed everything I already knew about him, that he was a selfish person who only thought about himself, and that family meant nothing to him. About a month after the funeral, the lawyer called us for the reading of the will. I went, obviously, and Kevin was also summoned, but didn't show up. So the lawyer proceeded without him. Turns out my dad had left me practically everything. The house, his savings, which wasn't much, but something, his car, everything. To Kevin, he left $1,000. Literally $1,000 from an inheritance of like $200,000 with the house included. And the lawyer explained to me that my dad had been very specific in his instructions. He'd written that he left that symbolic amount to make it clear he hadn't forgotten about Kevin, but that he'd consciously decided not to leave him anything significant due to his past actions. I'm not going to lie. I felt good when I heard that. I felt like my dad had recognized everything I'd done for him, how I'd been there when no one else was, and that Kevin had received exactly what he deserved, which was basically nothing. I signed all the necessary papers, put the house up for sale because I couldn't live there alone. It had too many memories, and I moved to an apartment closer to my work. About 3 weeks after that, I got a message from Kevin, the first direct contact I'd had with him in almost 9 years, if I'm not mistaken. The message said, "Hey Jason, I know it's been many years and things ended badly between us. I'd like for us to be able to talk. There are things I need to tell you. Can we meet?" And my first instinct was to ignore it completely, but something made me respond. Maybe curiosity. Maybe I needed to see what the hell he wanted after all this time. I told him we could meet at a public cafe. I wasn't going to invite him to my house or any private place, and we arranged to meet the following Saturday. When I got to the cafe, he was already there. And I'm not going to lie, I was shocked to see him. He looked much older than I remembered. He was like 34 but looked like he was in his 40s. He looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes. He'd gained weight. Basically, he looked like shit. We sat down and there was an awkward silence at first. I wasn't going to make this easy for him. If he wanted to talk, let him talk. Finally, he said, "Look, I know what I did was unforgivable. I know. I've thought about it all these years and I regret it so much. I was young and stupid and didn't measure the consequences of my actions." And I just looked at him without saying anything, because honestly those words meant nothing to me. It was too late for apologies. Then he kept talking, and eventually got to the real point of the meeting. He said, "I've been going through a very difficult time financially. I lost my job like 6 months ago. I owe 3 months' rent. And I heard from Aunt Patricia that Dad left you everything. And I thought maybe you and I could come to an agreement, that you could share some of the inheritance with me. We're brothers, after all." And there I had it. The real reason he wanted to reconcile. It wasn't because he really cared about what had happened or because he wanted to fix our relationship. It was because he was broke and thought he could get money out of me. I told him, "Kevin, Dad left you $1,000. That's what he decided you deserved. And I completely agree with his decision." He started getting aggressive, said it wasn't fair, that he was also our father's son, that he had a right to an equal part of the inheritance regardless of what had happened in the past. I reminded him that he hadn't been there when Dad was dying, that he didn't go to his funeral, that he'd abandoned the family 9 years ago when he decided to sleep with my girlfriend in my bed in the house where we all lived. I told him that actions have consequences, and these were the consequences of his actions. That maybe if he'd been a decent son, if he'd been there when Dad needed him, things would be different, but that he'd chosen his path and now had to live with it. He got up from the table, called me selfish, told me that Dad had poisoned me against him, that I was resentful and never forgave anything, and left leaving me there with my coffee. And you know what? I didn't feel anything when he left. Not guilt or sadness or relief, just nothing. Like I'd been talking to a stranger who meant nothing to me, which is basically what he was. After that, my Aunt Patricia called me. She was upset, told me how could I be so cruel to my brother, that he was going through a difficult time and I had the means to help him, that family helps each other no matter. What? I explained my point of view, but she didn't understand it or didn't want to understand it. She kept on with the same speech about how family is family and you have to forgive, basically completely invalidating everything that had happened, as if betraying your brother was something you just forget because time has passed. About 2 months ago, Kevin sent me another message. This time he didn't even pretend to want to reconcile. He directly asked me for a loan of $10,000, said he'd pay me back as soon as he got a job, but that he really needed the help. I responded with a simple no and blocked him from my phone, from my email, from everything. I don't want to know anything more about him. I don't want him to contact me. I don't want updates about his life through Aunt Patricia. I simply want him not to exist in my world. The thing is, now, part of my family thinks I'm a heartless asshole who's punishing my brother for a mistake he made when he was young, but I don't see it that way at all. I see a guy who betrayed in the worst possible way, someone who trusted him, who never showed true remorse until he needed something, who wasn't present when our father was dying, who didn't go to his funeral, and who now wants me to rescue him financially as if none of that had happened. And I just can't. I'm not going to do it. Sometimes I wonder if I'm too hard, if I should be the bigger person and help him despite everything. But then I remember my dad. I remember how he always told us that loyalty was the most important thing. I remember how he worked to exhaustion to give us a decent life. I remember how he held me when my world fell apart at 17, and I know I'm honoring his memory by standing firm on this. He made the decision to cut Kevin out of his life and his inheritance. I'm just respecting that decision and my own boundaries. I sold the house a few months ago. Used part of the money to buy my own place. Something small but mine. And invested the rest for the future. I work hard like my dad did. I'm doing well in my career. I have some close friends, though, not much family that I really care about. And it's okay. I'm okay with that. I learned that family isn't just blood, it's loyalty. It's being present when it matters. It's respecting and caring for the people you love. And Kevin failed at all of that a long time ago. Last week I found an old photo from when we were kids. Kevin would have been like 13 and I was like 5. We were in the backyard smiling at the camera. He had his arm around my shoulders. I looked at it for a moment and then put it away in a box with other things from the past. That kid in the photo doesn't exist anymore. Maybe he never really existed. Maybe I just saw what I wanted to see. The Kevin I know now is someone completely different. Someone I don't want in my life. And I'm at peace with that decision, or at least that's what I tell myself most days.